piece in the New England Journal about curing versus caring, as though in many physicians and researchers as well, it's a dichotomy. And there was a notion that if you had to choose a physician who was a curer or a carer, which would you choose? And I wonder whether you think that's a false dichotomy, or if you could talk a bit about why it is that the empathy, the compassion, and the rights orientation is often considered oxymoronic in the training of physicians and researchers.
The distinction was an important one, but I take it to illustrate the main thesis of all my work throughout my career, and that is that the choice among options, whether you're focused on curing or on caring, for example, is a choice that should not be left to the experts. It's not up to physicians or research scientists to make those kinds of choices. Now, I actually am inclined to give it a kind of political twist. Although it sounds outrageous, I believe it's very important for a patient to understand his or her physician's political and value orientation. I actually tested that in the writing of my doctoral dissertation, where I looked at the role of the physician in communicating birth control information. I wrote in the 1960s, birth control was the big topic, and what I pressed was the relationship between being an expert on the facts of birth control and being an expert on the values related to birth control. And my thesis was that physicians are surely experts on the science of birth control. One of the kinds of questions I would ask a doctor was, "Doctor, does the pill cause cancer?" And at the time, still today in a way, there's a lot of controversy about that question. I intentionally asked the questions of the doctors I interviewed the way a layperson would have to ask the question. So I didn't ask the question very precisely. I asked the general, almost naive question, "Doctor, does the pill cause cancer?" What I was interested in was the relationship of the doctor's answer to that question, which almost anybody would see as a kind of scientific question requiring answers from medical science. The relationship of the answers to that question to the values and beliefs that the doctor held. And I did this by asking physicians a bunch of these questions that anybody would interpret as science questions. How likely are you to get pregnant if you skip a pill mid-cycle, for example, was the kind of question I would ask. Then I also asked a bunch of what I called value questions. Doctor, is the birth control immoral? Does it violate natural law? Does it lead to promiscuity? Questions of this sort. Essentially asking, what are your values about birth control? Now, the hidden agenda that, quite frankly, I didn't acknowledge to the physicians I was interviewing, probably would raise questions about that today, but my hidden agenda was to look at the correlation between the physician's value judgments about birth control and the physician's answers about the science. What I found was that if the birth control pill was moral, it didn't cause cancer. And if the birth control pill was immoral, the answer was it caused cancer. Now, the intriguing thing about this was all the physicians who answered the question were answering accurately in their own minds, and they could actually cite studies that would support their views. For example, the physician who thought the pill could cause cancer, the physician who thought the pill was immoral, would, when I pressed him on what he thought about it causing cancer, the physician would say something like, there's studies of precarcinogenic cell changes in the breasts of beagles. Would you want your daughter taking a pill that does something like that? Now, they had reference to real studies. Turns out lots of chemicals cause precarcinogenic cell changes in the breasts of beagles, but they had real data in mind. If I ask the pro-birth control physician, he'd say, not a shred of evidence the pill has ever caused cancer in a human being, which was also scientifically correct. So I was intrigued by how the value orientation of the physician would filter the data set that they used in answering the patient's question on something like, does the pill cause cancer? And what I wanted to claim was, surely the physician is an expert on the science, but surely he's not mainly male physicians at the time. Surely he's not an expert on the ethical question, does the pill, is the birth control pill immoral? And yet we demonstrate that the values and beliefs about birth control were influencing the way the doctor communicated what everybody would take to be questions of scientific fact.